I was wondering if you could start by telling us a little bit about your career trajectory, where you started and how you ended up working alongside these two people.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for doing this, and thank you everyone for showing up. I'll be the first to admit the title is a bit of a clickbait title to kind of get everybody into the room because there's some amazing speakers. But I'll tell you my story and why I want to talk about this. But quick version of my story. I grew up in India, in Chennai, for those of you who know India, and sort of a very working class upbringing. And computers and technology changed my life. I got into computers when I was a teenager, taught myself to write code. That led to a career in technology. And I've been very fortunate and lucky. In 2007, I joined Microsoft. I worked for Satya for a bunch of years in Seattle before he was CEO of Microsoft. And then I was at Facebook, now Meta, working for Mark Zuckerberg. And then I've had opportunity to kind of work with Elon multiple occasions, most recently or infamously during the takeover at Twitter and X. And currently, I am a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. We are a large venture capital firm, and I do a bunch of fun, interesting stuff there, which we can talk about. But thank you. I think the reason why I wanted to kind of talk about this is when I was talking to the organizers about what might be interesting, I come from the world of startups, of entrepreneurship, of people who are just kind of trying to build things which kind of push the world forward. And I was trying to figure out what might be interesting to a lot of you who come from the world of government, from policy, who often have to work with entrepreneurs. And somebody had this amazing idea. They said, okay, one thing that could be interesting is lessons on how these companies are run. Okay, so let me ask you something, right? How many of you have heard of Elon Musk? Okay, great. Zuckerberg, yes, common. Now, I'm pretty sure with the moment I said that, you all had a point of view. Some of you loved them, hated them. With Zuckerberg, you've probably seen the movie or read the book. With Elon, you've probably seen on X. And what I've realized is when I talk to founders is two things. Number one is that they were really looking for stories and ideas of how to run their companies. And two is they had no idea how some of these world-famous leaders were in the day-to-day. How do they spend Monday mornings, right? How are they in a regular meeting? Because that is the bread and butter. So that's kind of the things I wanted to talk about today, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving that kind of broader context. One of the things that I'm really interested in is the difference in kind of management and leadership styles. And I'm curious what your impressions were from leaving India and heading to somewhere with a very unique culture, in particular in the Bay Area. What struck you the most about what's different there? Yeah,
so I grew up in a very sort of traditional upbringing in India. I worked there for a short period of time in a kind of very traditional environment. And when I first went to Silicon Valley, it was honestly a huge culture shock because it operated so differently from where I had grown up. And for a lot of people here, when you hear, read, or meet folks from the technology ecosystem, maybe be it Silicon Valley, maybe be it elsewhere, it might seem so alien and so different. But what I've realized over the years is if you look at some of the great companies, and talking, Meta, Tesla, take your pick, they all have some very, very common attributes. And I've seen these across 3 or 4 different companies now. And maybe for those of you in the audience who are kind of wondering, okay, how can I apply them to my day job? A couple of these attributes. The first one is, if you look at Zuckerberg, Elon, all these CEOs, the first thing I would say is they don't delegate as much as they're very much into the details. And if I could be provocative, I would say delegation is overrated and micromanagement is underrated, right? And all the great CEOs I've met are always micromanagers. In fact, I have not met a single great CEO who's not. So what does it mean? Maybe I'll give you an example. When I was working with Zuckerberg in 2013, we had a time when we were going to miss our revenue numbers for the quarter, or we were on trajectory to. And what Zuck would do is he would have daily meetings where he would be in the details. And when I say the details, I'm not just talking about somebody will pull up a PowerPoint and make a presentation. No. He would be in the dashboards. You would get a message from him in the morning about why is this number doing that. He would look at every single pixel. He would know things better than the 22-year-old engineer who's working on it, right? And this was in 2013. My wife worked at Meta a couple of years ago, and she was telling me that he is still the exact same way today. She was in a meeting with him at 10 p.m. at night from where he was like, hey, that pixel is in the wrong place. And look, this is a guy who's worth, I think, $140 billion, and he's still obsessing over every single pixel for a company which has 70,000 people. Same with Elon, right? Like, I think for those of you who heard of Elon or know of Elon, you might think he spends a lot of time on Twitter tweeting. He doesn't. When I was there with him when the Twitter acquisition happened, 95% of the meetings were with the junior-most engineers, right? Think like your 25-year-old people, and he would be on the whiteboard, whiteboarding out diagrams and being in the details. And the point I'm trying to make is that, what I've seen with all these leaders is unless you are in the details, the finite details, you don't have mastery of the decision space. You don't actually often understand what is going on. So that's number one, right? So each of these people, right, and whether you may approve or disapprove, that's a different story. I'm telling you, they all are micromanagers. The second part of that is very connected. Each of these great companies have a tremendous focus on speed, right? And one quick test I will ask you this, and maybe a good question for you also, is if somebody in your organization, right, and whichever organization you may be, maybe you're in a government, maybe you're in a think tank, maybe you're in a company, if somebody says, let us have a follow-up meeting after this meeting to discuss this, what is the right period of time to have that follow-up meeting? Is it the same day? Is it in a couple of days? Is it in a week? When will somebody go set up the calendar? For example, for you folks, when will somebody set up the follow-up meeting?
Within a few days. I think we work. News is pretty fast moving.
That's great. Okay, that's actually great, because it turns out that speed is the number one often determinant of success and getting things done. So each one of these great companies, if some follow-up meetings usually tend to happen in a day or two. But it's kind of there's no right or wrong answer. But what I've seen is the focus on the details and speed go a long way, because what happens is often when you're building technology, you don't know what the right answer is, right? You don't know what Instagram is going to look like. You don't know what an algorithm is going to look like. You don't know the details. So when you have speed, your rate of learning, your rate of iteration improves. And if you go weeks, months, years, and you're doing this faster than your competition, right? You're learning every day. You're learning every couple of days. And your details, those things really compound over time. So those are kind of two patterns I've seen across every single great CEO.
I think the statement about micromanaging being actually good and not delegating is kind of a provocative one.
I'm trying to be spicy. Yeah. I'm trying to wake everyone up.
So I guess one of the reactions people might have is feeling like that doesn't create a lot of space for people to be autonomous and develop into leaders in their own right. How do you think about that in terms of these CEOs and others when it comes to building a succession pipeline and cultivating who's going to run the company after them?
Well, the first point I will say is that if you look at the leadership of all these companies, they've been around for a very, very long time, and they've often gone on to become great CEOs in their own right. Like, for example, one of my good friends is Fiji Simo. She was, she kind of grew up the ranks from, being a line-level product manager to being head of the Blue app at Facebook. And she recently just became CEO of Instacart, and she took, which kind of a big grocery delivery shopping service in the US, and she just took it public. They went public, I think, last year. And so first I would say is there is a history of fantastic leadership. So that's one. So there's something which is keeping a lot of these people happy, right? I think the second thing is I find that people want to work in an environment where they're delivering results and things are happening, right? Like if you have smart young people, they don't want to waste their 20s, they don't want to waste their 30s, where there's like, okay, I'm going nowhere. They want to work in a place where momentum is happening. And if you can deliver that, that makes up for a lot of it, right? So you're absolutely right. Like, when you think micromanager, you often think somebody is looking over your shoulder who is like, messing with whatever you wanted and overturning decisions. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like you in an environment where you're aligned behind a mission, you have fantastic people to work with, and maybe that's not for everybody. You can go find something that's also perfect, and that seems to pull along some great people.
I think with both the leaders you've spoken about, they've been pretty adaptable to different technologies as there's been a lot of innovation. I know that you've worked on areas like crypto and AI. Have you seen, how have you seen leaders like Mark and Elon adapt to those?
So there's a good pattern and anti-pattern. I think one is, what I've seen not great leaders do is often they will just trust middle management. They will trust other people to do their research, right? Which is great. But I think if you want to be at the very top tier, like for example, when Zuckerberg, when he left college in Harvard in 2004, the current boom of AI wasn't a thing. The current, boom of virtual reality, spatial computing wasn't a thing. So he obviously had to learn. And I think what I've seen pattern again is, number one is all these folks, and I like to think I do it in themselves. I know a lot of people here probably doing it. The first thing is they are themselves seeking out the experts, right? It is not common, it's not uncommon for Zuck to go send a cold email to some PhD student saying like, hey, I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I'd love to have coffee with you and kind of just understand what you're doing, and doing that again and again. So first is they are themselves taking the time to learn something. And the second part, what they're very good at, is surrounding themselves with experts, right? And experts from various domains. So if you look at Zuck, like in 2012, 2013, Facebook did not have any muscles in virtual reality or hardware development. It was basically, some of you, maybe I'm old now, some of you may be old enough to remember this, but Facebook used to be made fun of as a social networking company, right? If you went back to 2010, 2011, people were like, there's a social network, who cares? Nobody makes a joke now. So they've had to learn and build these muscles. In every case, I think the key has been Mark, Elon, whoever they are, themselves getting into the details, right? Which means playing with the technology themselves. They're all technologists, so they write code themselves, they play with it themselves. Mark still checks in code to this day. They are surrounding themselves with great engineers. I'll give you a great story about Facebook. When I was at Facebook, there used to be this kind of joke that you can tell how much Mark cared about your project based on your physical distance to him. Basically, what he would do is the teams he liked and he cared about, he would put them in tables around him. And the further out you were, he sort of trusted you to do your own thing, or maybe he didn't care about you, one of the two. But the point there was, there was a relentless focus on seeking out information themselves and learning. Now, this is different. I think some other CEOs are good, but not great. What they would do is they would defer to the experts, or they will say, look, I'm going to get a consultant, they're going to send me a great presentation, or I'm going to read some opinion piece. This is not what these folks are doing. They are seeking out first-hand information, first-hand people, building a model for themselves. The one part I will add to that is, I think one of Zuck's real superpowers, not to kind of use Mark Lott as an example, is that I think he has, every day, he has little ego, and he wakes up and says, okay, based on what I know today and how the world is changing, right? Like, how do I kind of shape Meta's strategy? So, being able to learn, being able to kind of have a lack of ego and say, I'm going to change my opinion every single day. That's very powerful.
Both of these leaders run companies that are polarizing. They're both also.
What? Really? Everyone loves them. Doesn't everyone love Elon and Zuck?
As individuals, they're polarizing, and their companies can definitely incite strong feelings about whether they have kind of undue influence over society, whether they're contributing to inequality. How have you seen them engage and respond to criticism? And is there something in how they deal with that as leaders that you want to comment on?
A couple of thoughts. I'll try and be spicy. I think the first thing is, if you want to accomplish great things, I think it's impossible without getting people mad at you. In fact, I would say, and I'm not talking about Zuck and Elon, it could be Palmer Luckey with Anduril, it could be Alex Karp, who I think was speaking here with Palantir. There are many, many, many examples. If you want to do something amazing, it is going to piss a lot of people off, if you pardon my language. And I think what is more important to figure out is what you want to accomplish, what is your mission, your vision, how do you kind of inspire and motivate the team around you. In fact, in some ways, sometimes having a polarizing mission is good because you want only the true believers. You don't want the person who's going to leave your team the first time there is some bad press or the first time something doesn't work, because the nature of these projects means that it's going to take a long time. There'll be a lot of failure, and it may or may not work, right? So you need people who are true believers, and polarizing is a great example. I'll also say the flip side. How many of you use, say, Slack or Teams or some project like that to collaborate in your workplace? A lot of you? Okay. I think one of the major risks modern CEOs have, and this is a friend of mine coined this space, is they CEO by Slack emoji. And what that means is they do the thing which is going to get them the most popular response to from their internal teams on Slack. Everyone gives them a thumbs up, or when they post about an X, everyone says this is amazing. The challenge with that is what you're trying to accomplish is not a popularity contest, right? And and if you do that, very often you find yourself in the world where, number one, you are trying to do things to keep your employees happy, right? Which may not be the same thing as delivering the results you want for whatever your organization you have. Second is a small set of your employees may be very vocal. And you may not be hearing from the vast majority of them who just want to do great work. So I have this phrase with a few friends of mine where it's like, don't manage by Slack. It's a dangerous path.
I'm curious if there's any lessons on a personal level you've taken from, and how it's informed your work from working with Zuckerberg and Elon.
Yeah, for me, I was very lucky. Both my wife and I are very lucky. We're supposed to do this talk together. And, so when I was with Elon in the Twitter takeover, I was trying to say, okay, if I was doing something like this someday, what would I learn from him? And I think I came away with a few things. The first one is that, like I said, focus on the details. Speed really matters. I would say I would add a couple more things. The simplicity is very powerful, right? Like, if you can't make an idea, a concept super simple and keep drilling down until you get the simplest possible answer, there is always something wrong. I'll give you an example. So in the first day when Elon took over Twitter, right, I was there and we were discussing. Elon was like, hey, I want to upload podcast videos on Twitter, which is now X, which is not possible, by the way, right? Like, you just had Tucker, upload his interview with Putin over there. And he was like, why can't I upload a 60-minute video? And somebody was like, we don't know. And they were like, well, can we find out how many minutes we can upload? And they were like, Twitter's limit is 10. Well, okay, that limit is 10. How much can I actually upload? Well, we called an engineer from the room, and they said the limit is 42. Why is it 42? And you kind of keep going down, and it's always an organizational issue, some engineering issue, but it's somewhere in the middle, right? And there's never a good reason. And he just kept asking, like, why can't I upload more? And and that unlocked so many organizational questions about, like, well, did we make the right budget prioritization decision there? So I often find the push towards the simplest possible articulation and is very powerful, because if you can't get that simplicity where in your head I know exactly what that means, you're wrong. And I think if you look at all the the great CEOs, Elon, Zuck, we had Sam talk yesterday, they all are very, very good at keeping things very simple. So I think a litmus test for each of you as leaders, yourselves, or maybe you're choosing to work for someone, is how do I, what is the simplest possible form of this? And if it's not as simple, make it simple, or there's probably something wrong.
Thank you. Final question as we go into the next panel, which is focused on investments. I'm wondering if there's anything you can share for how you're thinking about this for the year ahead in your work in Andreessen Horowitz.
Well, thank you. So, so a couple of things. One, my wife and I personally do a podcast on entrepreneurship, on technology. Please Google me. You can follow it anywhere. I think my day job is I invest in entrepreneurs. It's a great job because I get to hang out with amazing people who tell me what they're building to change the world. I'm sure some of you are here in this room. And I just want everyone to know that we are living in a very, very exciting time, right? Like, and I think it's only happened a few times in our past, maybe in the 90s. Like, imagine you were in 1995, 96, and somebody told you, hey, the internet is going to happen, and it is going to change everything, right? Or maybe you were in 2007 and Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, and you were like, this is going to change things. I believe we are living through one of these eras now, and we are all very, very lucky to, to kind of see something amazing happen. What it results in, your guess is as good as mine. But in terms of what I'm interested in, one, I spend a lot of my day job on crypto, on blockchains, on decentralized systems. Very quickly, I think, the internet can really benefit from having decentralized applications where people are able to govern the system at scale. I can go into a lot more detail. Second, obviously, AI. Unless you've been hiding, AI has kind of been the topic of the hour. I think one of the things about AI is even the last 6 to 8 months, what we sort of expected has dramatically changed, and I think that's going to keep happening. Next year's summit, if Sam shows up, is going to be very, very different. So I would say all of us should feel lucky. We live in a very, very exciting time, and I'm just kind of excited to kind of just see what amazing applications and companies people build.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Sriram.
Thank you so much for having me.